Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Alexa and today we're going to be doing a review of The Teacher by Freida McFadden. This book came out earlier this year in February. It is 379 pages long and it has 80 chapters plus an epilogue, so 81 chapters. And the chapters average out to about 4 to 5 pages per chapter. On Goodreads, this book has a 3.98 rating. That is out of 280,000 reviews. And then this also has a 4.3 on Amazon, and that is out of 91,000 reviews. I'm gonna read the description of the book if you don't already know what it's about. Lesson number 1, trust no one. Eve has a good life. She gets up every day, gets a kiss from her husband, and heads off to teach math at a local high school. All as it should be, except last year, KSM High School was rocked by a scandal with one student, Addie, at its center. And this year, Eve is dismayed to find this girl in her class. Addie can't be trusted. She lies, she hurts people, she destroys lives. At least that's what everyone says. But nobody knows the real Addie. Nobody knows the secrets that could destroy her if people at the school found out. And when Eve discovers the shocking truth, Addie will do anything to keep her quiet. So essentially, our main characters in this story are going to be Addie, who is the troublesome student, and then we have Eve, the teacher, and we have Eve's husband, Nate, who is also a teacher at the same school. Addie ends up being in both of their classes. Eve is a math teacher, Nate is an English teacher. Addie was also involved in this scandal at the high school that involved a previous teacher there, Arthur Tuttle. We go on to find out that he no longer works there, allegedly because of Addie. As the book goes on, it is very clear that Addie does not enjoy Eve's class or like Eve as a teacher, and eventually Addie and Nate connect over poetry, and she really starts to enjoy her English class. But Eve is very suspicious of Addie due to the whole situation with the other teacher that no longer works there anymore. So this is essentially the setup for the story, and then the story kind of goes on from there, which I'm not going to continue to explain yet because I don't want to spoil anything. But yeah, that is the gist of this book. I'm going to get into the plot twists and the spoilers in just a second. I will also say to check the trigger warnings if you're interested in reading this book. There are some sensitive subjects. I won't say exactly what yet because I don't want to spoil it, but just putting that out there. I personally really enjoyed this book. I thought it was highly entertaining, and if you don't like waiting until the end of a thriller book to get payoff, you may not love this one because a lot of the plot twists and payoff kind of come at the very end of the book. I've noticed that Freida McFadden does that with a lot of her books, so if you don't enjoy that type of thriller writing style, you may not like this book. However, it worked for me. I find it fun to read about fictional drama that I'm not involved with. And just because I enjoyed this book does not mean that I agree with the decisions that these characters make or the subject matter that's discussed. I'm going to now get into the spoiler section of this video and explain the plot a bit more in depth and rate all of the plot twists. So if you don't want to hear spoilers about this book, you can go ahead and skip to this time. Like I said, if you don't want spoilers, this is your last chance to skip to this time. Okay guys, buckle up because this is going to be a little bit crazy. Here is my spoiler plot summary. It might be kind of long, so I don't know if you can exactly call it a summary, but I'm going to do my best to say this as quickly as possible. All right, like I said, we're starting out with our math teacher Eve, her husband, English teacher Nate, and the troublesome student Addie, who previously got Arthur Tuttle, another teacher, fired from the school due to a previous incident that is not named in the beginning of the story. They also allude to the fact that Arthur Tuttle is more on the unattractive side. Also, the teacher Nate is apparently really hot. So Kenzie also has an ex-best friend. His name is Hudson Jankowski. And this was basically like her only friend, but this popular girl, Kenzie, started dating him. And they're no longer friends anymore, and also Kenzie becomes Addie's bully. So these are all the characters you need to know at the moment. We basically start out with them at school, going through the motions and learning about who everyone is. All throughout the beginning of the book, it is mentioned that Eve is obsessed with shoes. Shoes are brought up basically every other page. So whenever it is revealed that Eve is having an affair with a shoe store employee at the shoe store she frequents, it's not really shocking. The shoe store employee that Eve is having an affair with is named Jay. So again, nothing really happens. We're kind of just going through some more days at school, getting more interactions from the characters. Then it is Eve's 30th birthday. Nate takes Eve out for a birthday dinner, and Addie also happens to be at dinner at the same restaurant. And then When Addie gets up to go to wait in line for the bathroom, Nate also gets up and goes to wait in line for the bathroom. They bump into each other, and essentially Nate notices that Addie is having a hard time. He asks if anything is wrong, and she basically tells him that she's getting bullied by Kenzie. So throughout this whole book, Nate and Addie have been connecting in their English class over poetry. So Nate feels like it would be a good exercise for Addie to write basically like a hate letter to her bully. So he gives this assignment to her to write a hate letter to her bully. He thinks it will help her get all of her hard feelings off of her chest, help express herself, things like that. And he ends up exchanging a poem with her. It's a bit later in the book, but I just wanted to note that while I was talking about the poems. Then Addie's locker gets filled with shaving cream at school by Kenzie, and Hudson figures out that his girlfriend Kenzie did this to her. Hudson starts to feel really bad about all the bullying that his girlfriend Kenzie is doing to Addie. So he helps her clean up the locker, and we basically get our first plot twist. The reason that Hudson and Addie are no longer friends is because essentially Hudson helped Addie kill her drunk, terrible dad. Basically, it's explained as sort of like an accidental / purposeful murder where he's pretty drunk and he's standing by the stairs and they basically push him down the stairs and he dies. And then they cover everything up by going over to Hudson's house and they were doing homework there. Then the police found the dad. So it kind of just looked like he fell down the stairs on his own. But it turns out Hudson and Addie did that. And then Hudson was no longer friends with Addie after that. I rate this plot twist like a 5 out of 10. In thriller books, I don't super enjoy like these accidental, like realistic murders. I don't know why, I just don't like them very much. So that was kind of like meh for me. So moving on, Addie ends up getting caught cheating on a math test. And since Nate and Addie have this sort of like buddy-buddy relationship, Nate basically talks Eve into not getting her into trouble. So Addie is sort of like indebted to Nate for helping her not get in trouble for cheating on the math test. Then one day at school, Kenzie spills Addie's lunch on purpose to bully her. And whenever she does this, she ends up seeing the poem that Nate gave to Addie. She has this sort of like reaction to it, but we don't really know why she reacts to it. So just keep that in mind moving forward. Now at this point, Addie is kind of obsessed with Nate, and during a dinner party that Eve and Nate have, Addie shows up in the yard, and while Eve is taking the trash out, she catches her. Nate tells Addie to deny everything, but apparently this is the same exact thing that Addie did with the other teacher, Mr. Tuttle. So it's kind of gonna be hard to make Addie look innocent because she's done this before with another teacher. Also, I forgot to mention at this point that Nate and Addie are kind of in this like full-blown relationship. She's like 16, obviously not appropriate. So after this whole showing up in the yard business, Nate essentially ghosts Addie and she starts to get obsessive, and she ends up going to his classroom and kissing him at school to try to like win him back. And Eve ends up walking by the classroom and catching them. She takes a picture with her phone. Then later on, Eve ends up confronting Nate about the kiss with Addie. She's like, "What the heck are you doing? I caught you on camera kissing Addie. There's something wrong with you." She gets really pissed and she kicks him out of the house. Nate is not living at the house anymore, and he ends up telling Addie that he really wishes Eve was just out of the picture so that it could just be Nate and Addie. So Addie, of course, with her obsessiveness, takes this literally and ends up breaking into Eve's house. She apparently hits Eve with a frying pan to the head 3 times. And like whenever I read that, I couldn't get it out of my head that reminded me so much of Tangled. Addie ends up knocking out Eve, and Nate shows up to the house and they decide to go and bury her. They go to an abandoned pumpkin patch. They dig a grave for Eve, wrap her up in a sheet, bury her in the grave, and then basically Nate abandons Addie at the gravesite. It's in the middle of nowhere, so she has like basically no way home. No cell service, of course. So Addie has nobody to call and help her except for her ex-best friend Hudson. So he comes and picks her up in the middle of the night, takes her home. Now at this point, Nate is going to basically frame Addie for the murder of Eve. So he files a police report that Eve is missing, and he uses the assignment that he gave Addie at the restaurant to write a hate letter to her bully. He uses that note as evidence with the police, saying that Addie wrote this hate note about Eve and left it with them in order to pin the murder on Addie. Then some weird stuff starts happening, like shoes end up in random places in the house. There's like pumpkins and birds appearing in the house. So Nate is starting to get super freaked out. He's feeling kind of haunted. So he ends up going to the gravesite to double check that Eve is dead and in the grave. And here's plot twist number 2. Eve is not in the grave and she is not dead. I rate this plot twist like a 7 out of 10, just because for me, the realism with this one is pretty off base. But it did add a lot to the story because I don't really know what would have happened if she just ended up being dead. So I liked that one, but I wasn't obsessed with it. Then around the same time, Kenzie ends up going to Addie and apologizes to her for being such a bully because, plot twist number 3, Kenzie was also in an underage relationship with Nate when she was 14. And the reason that she realized that Addie was is because Nate gave Kenzie the same exact poem when they were in a relationship. Then he gave the same exact poem to Addie. So she kind of put 2 and 2 together and was like, okay, they're in a relationship because he did that same thing for me. I give this plot twist like an 8 out of 10. Kenzie says to Addie, will you please come to the police with me? They'll believe us if it's 2 of us. They won't believe me if it's only me. So Addie's like, yeah, I'll go to the police with you. So meanwhile, Eve is literally somehow digging herself out of the grave. She calls her affair shoe store man, Jay, to come and pick her up. She tells him everything that happened. And essentially they come up with a plan to leave all these weird, creepy, haunting things with Nate. That's why he got so creeped out by all the shoes and the pumpkins and the birds. They set him up basically to come back to the grave and check if she was dead. When he came back to check if she was dead, they end up burying Nate in the same exact grave that Eve was previously buried in, except this time Nate is actually dead. As Eve is covering up Nate in the grave with dirt, Eve remembers a poem that he once gave to her when she was younger and their relationship was just beginning. And plot twist number 4, it is the same poem that he gave to Addie and that he gave to Kenzie, meaning that Eve and Nate were previously in an underage relationship as well. Theirs just ended up ending in marriage. For this plot twist, I rate this one a 9 out of 10. I also forgot to mention that in the very beginning of the book, it mentions that Eve's parents do not like Nate and they do not like Eve and Nate's relationship. But at the very beginning of the book, obviously we don't know why. So I thought it was really fun that that little nugget that we were given at the very beginning of the book ends up being something significant at the end of the book. And now getting into the epilogue, the investigation for Eve ends up being closed because she was found, obviously. And somehow they just assumed that Nate left town and never said anything else. Eve ends up quitting her teaching job where she lives and moves away. And the epilogue is basically Addie and Hudson, they are friends again. Kenzie quits bullying Addie. Then the final plot twist, and definitely the craziest, is that it is revealed to us that since Hudson's last name is Jankowski, he also sometimes goes by Jay, and we find out that the best friend Hudson is also the same exact person that works at the shoe store that Eve was having an affair with. So it turns out that she was also having underage relations with this guy. That plot twist had my jaw on the floor. I give that plot twist a 10 out of 10. That was so fantastic because in my eyes, this was under our noses the whole time, but only clarified at the very end of the book, giving you so much to rethink about the story and what went on. So yeah, that is my spoilery plot summary of The Teacher by Freida McFadden and all my ratings of the plot twists in this book. As for my final thoughts on this book, I ended up rating this book 4 stars. I also rated The Inmate by her 4 stars, and I think this one is gonna be slightly above The Inmate for me. So far out of the Freida McFadden books that I have read, it goes The Teacher, The Inmate, and The Housemaid. But yeah, hopefully I end up getting to read some more Freida McFadden books soon. But for now, that is gonna be all for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and leave a comment down below letting me know anything you wanna let me know. Make sure that you're following me on Instagram and make sure that you're subscribed so that you can see more videos from me in the future. And I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!